Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Usherwood. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of Crown Property at LINZ, and I just want to extend a cordial welcome to you all. It is heartening to see such a positive response to the investment screening workshop, and this is the last of 3 being held this week. Before I go any further, I want to introduce the Honourable Louise Upston, the Minister for Land Information, which is of course the department that houses the Overseas Investment Office. Thank you, Minister, for hosting this workshop and for your commitment to the work that is going on to facilitate better investment outcomes. We look forward to hearing from you shortly. Alongside the Minister here in front of the room are my colleagues, the Chief Executive of LINZ, Mr Mersi, and the Group Manager of the Overseas Investment Office, Annalise McClure. Welcome to you both. I also want to acknowledge 2 other people. You may have heard that Peter is leaving us on the 1st of July to take up the job of Chief Executive for the Ministry of Transport. When Peter departs, Andrew Crisp, who is currently Deputy Chief Executive Building Resources and Markets at MB, will be acting Chief Executive until a permanent appointment is made. And that's Andrew there. I also want to acknowledge Leslie Haynes, who's joined us this week as Deputy Chief Executive on a short-term arrangement responsible for the Overseas Investment Office. Leslie will be with us for up to 6 months and just looking after the office as it undergoes significant change and continues to handle a heavy and growing workload. We currently today, I think, have 88 applications on the go, so the workload is increasing. The program today is that our Minister will speak in a moment, and then Peter Mersi will present changes to the investment regime that are taking place and how we can work together to ensure the investment regime works as well as it can. Then we can have your say as we open the floor for questions and feedback. So it is now my pleasure to ask the Honourable Louise Upston to speak to you.
Thanks very much, Brian, and good afternoon. Thanks very much for giving us some of your time this afternoon. I'm going to keep my comments really brief because at the end of the day, this is a workshop. This is about how we are asking you how you can help us to help you do the work of overseas investment better than we do currently. It is a government priority. We clearly understand the importance of attracting high quality foreign investment into New Zealand. As a rural MP, I also understand the vital importance of that investment and what it means for not just the cities of New Zealand, but the regions. So the intention of today is really to look at what are the changes that we've already sort of set in motion as a result of the fees review that we've undergone. And I do want to just acknowledge the people who participated in that process. The submissions and discussion that I had with many of you last year were a significant part of making improvements that are already in track. So the intention of today is then to look at what else, what's the next phase of improvements based on your feedback. And this particular piece of work is not just land information in the Overseas Investment Office, it's working with MB, it's working with NZ Trade and Enterprise, it's working with the Ministry of Primary Industries. This is a whole of government approach. So I do want you to be reassured that we are connecting all the dots to make the process easier, to make the process more attractive, and if you like, to make the wheels go faster. So in terms of the legislation, we believe that the legislation is where it needs to be. I'm very, very clear that it is a privilege to own New Zealand land. I never want to be in a situation where people think that the Overseas Investment Office is a rubber stamping machine. It's clearly not. I think some of you would like it to be a little bit more that direction than they are currently. But the Act has that balance right. There are, however, lots of things that we can do together to make the process better, and that's the focus of this afternoon. I'm really happy to hear what's not working, but really, really want to hear about what you see are the practical solutions of what we can change from this point to make it better. And the intention of this isn't just a one-hit wonder. the series of workshops. This is the start of an ongoing dialogue and conversation with you to provide feedback to us about further improvements that we can make to make sure that New Zealand is attracting great foreign investment and that we are giving you the certainty and the turnaround that you expect from the Overseas Investment Office. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm going to hand over to Peter to go through the formal presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Before I ask Peter to present to us, I want to pick up on the Minister's acknowledgement of other officials in the room. Of course, Andrew Crisp, who soon will be with LINZ, is here as MB, so at the moment. We've also got from Treasury Mark Holden and Christopher Nees, where Mark's gone, he was sitting there. Oh, down there. And also from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Quentin Quinn there. It really emphasises what our Minister has said, that we want to be joined up government, and it's how we want to approach the issues today. So it's now my pleasure to ask Peter Mersi to speak.
Kia ora koutou, thanks Brian. Minister, thank you for the introduction and for hosting today's event. I want to start by stating that we have a couple of objectives at the end of this, at the end of our process. What we are trying to do is we would like to be able to provide greater certainty for applicants through getting decisions made faster. We're looking to provide greater transparency about where applications are in the process, and we're looking at ways that we can provide additional guidance to help you prepare applications to ensure it has the greatest chance of a speedy and positive outcome. But I do want to stress those things will take time. We have begun some of those changes, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it will take time for us to achieve all of that. As has already been mentioned, I'll be leaving the role shortly, but the fact that we have Andrew Crisp and Leslie Haynes here with us today is a reflection of the fact that this is the beginning of what, or we really want this to be an ongoing engagement, and it's about having an open engagement so that we can explore what the opportunities are for us to improve what we do, and also, again, for us to identify ways that we can help you on more of an ongoing basis. I'd like to start by just reminding ourselves why we have an overseas investment regime in New Zealand. The objective of the regime is to ensure that we are attracting quality investment and quality investors. The role of the office as the regulator is to ensure that those investments are indeed beneficial to New Zealand, and that the conditions that are attached to those investments are effectively enforced. But actually, at the end of the day, we have our collective interests are aligned on this, because you working with applicants, it's all about identifying value-add investors to New Zealand. So I believe there is a real opportunity for us to collectively work to ensure that we have an overseas investment regime that is achieving those goals of bringing in quality investment and quality investors, and doing so in a way where the compliance costs are reduced and the speed of those processes are increased, while still maintaining the sort of quality benchmarks we're looking for. And that's the intention of the changes I'll be talking about. There's a lot of change going on. The government has recently announced a package of policy and operational changes, and the office has been making improvements in the way in which we undertake our responsibilities. So one of the aims of today is to, at a high level at least, explore some of those changes. We're also keen, as I've said, to identify where we can help provide a greater focus for you in the applications that you are pulling together to ensure that you have the best possible experience. And I guess we're keen to understand, beyond the things we're already doing, what could it be that will help achieve that experience for you. As Brian said, this is the third of the 3 workshops. We've already received quite a lot of really interesting comment and thought about either areas that we can look to do things differently, or indeed areas that we might be able to look at providing sort of some regulatory support to reduce compliance costs, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. An increase in the fees is a major part of the changes that have been announced, and it does mean that the office will be able to increase its resourcing and to assess applications faster. So we have a target of improving our target times by 20% as a result of those changes. Our hope is that by being able to reduce that time for processing, we will increase investor confidence and improve certainty. And that overall should improve the attractiveness of New Zealand, or the relative attractiveness of New Zealand to overseas investors. There will be further changes which will provide some limited exemptions coming into effect at the end of this year or early next year. Now, this is in direct response to feedback the Minister received at the meetings that she referred to, where we've been able to find ways to remove some things which otherwise impose unnecessary compliance costs. This information is available, although what we found in the first 2 workshops is that it hasn't been very well known that we're looking to make these exemptions. So I just want to briefly run through what they are. The first is exempting acquisitions of leasehold farmland for leases with a term of up to 20 years from the requirement to first advertise that land on the open market. Second exemption is exempting leasehold land from screening where a previously consented lease is being renewed or re-granted, essentially on the same terms and conditions with the same ownership and for the same property. The third is exempting transactions between overseas parties for specified land that's considered less sensitive. So we've described that as small scale, so less than 5 hectares, where the transaction is incidental to a larger one and where the original transaction was previously screened. Now those are ands, not ors, just so you're clear about that. The fourth exemption is exempting some transactions where the consent is required as a result of some Public Works Act actions. And then the last one is around exempting overseas owned custodians who hold shares on behalf of New Zealanders from the requirement for consent for those shareholdings only. So the Treasury has the lead on the policy around overseas investment, and they will be releasing an exposure draft of these regulations in August or September. They are being worked on as we speak. I think it's fair to say that as in the first 2 workshops, we have received some other ideas on what other sorts of exemptions might be possible. It's unlikely, I suspect, that we can get far enough to have those incorporated into this exposure draft. We'll see how we go. There might be some easy wins in there. But when it comes to question time, just a reminder, we're really keen to hear any others that you think we might be able to progress. The fee increases will also allow us to undertake more monitoring and enforcement, and that will include the potential for site visits to gain a clearer picture of what is actually happening on the ground. We anticipate that there will be around 10 site visits per year, and that's a way of ensuring that applicants are meeting their ongoing obligations. There are a number of changes happening to the way we approach applications. So in terms of what we're doing in the department, the first is we are and have been actually over recent months applying a much more rigorous quality assurance process. The idea behind that is to give applicants early notice of issues that may well arise or are likely to arise and therefore inhibit a timely decision. The process also encourages an overall improvement in the quality of submissions when they first come in, and it means that those quality submissions will essentially go to the top of the queue. We're also looking at applying more of a risk-based approach to application assessment. Now, this is always very hard to articulate because it's not something where we can draw up a set of rules to define. But for applications, for example, applications from existing investors who have a track record of full compliance with conditions that are relatively straightforward, well-documented and non-controversial, they can expect to go through a lot faster than those that don't meet those types of criteria. Now, we will be feeling our way a little bit as to how far we can go on some of those dimensions, but certainly the intent is to better apply some of that risk management to the applications. And the final point is we'll be encouraging all of our staff to be engaging much more with applicants about where in the assessment process particular applications are. And again, we've started on that. The template emails that provide applicants' lawyers with information about when an application can be expected to enter the assessment process after the QA process has been accepted. So that's been incorporated into those emails. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times we've already started some of this, and We have seen an improvement in processing times. So on average, assessments the assessment times fell 25% when you look at the end of last year to the beginning of this year. I'll come on and talk a little bit more about some of those timeframes in a moment. The new fees that enable a lot of this to happen come into effect on the 4th of July. I'm very confident that you've already had a little bit of time to look at those fees and are reasonably familiar with them. But in the event that you aren't, you can certainly find a link to them on our website. So I don't propose to go through the fees in detail today, because as I say, I'm sure you've already looked at it. The key messages are in the chart behind me. The package of changes that I've outlined is about how we are going to attempt to provide increased certainty and faster processing to get investors through that process faster. I'd also like to spend a few minutes talking about what you can do to help ensure that your applications get through that process as quickly and efficiently as possible. It goes without saying that a well-written, a well-researched, evidence-based application is going to provide you with the best chance of achieving a successful result. But I did feel compelled to say that because we have a large number of applications that we receive which don't meet that basic hurdle. And every time we're required to go back to an applicant, by definition, it slows down the assessment time and the time when a decision is taken. And it's not just the time it's back with the applicant, but if that's for any length of time, obviously it takes our people time to refamiliarise themselves with the case. So any time that we're not actively working on it is time lost. So it's important that the application has depth and is thorough and internally consistent. Really importantly, the business plan is the story of the investment, and it tells us about what the applicant intends to do and how the proposed business benefits will benefit New Zealand. And like any story, a story that's well told has a lot more chance of being listened to. So I'd really encourage you to tell a story in there. The story needs to go beyond just telling us what the benefits are. It needs to explain how those benefits are actually going to be generated. I'd also encourage you to draw on the guidance we have on our website. It's there to try and help you. If you have any questions when you look at that guidance, please contact us. Two reasons for that. One is we don't want to confuse you with what's on there, so we're happy to clarify. And secondly, we're always looking to improve that guidance, so the feedback you give us gives us a chance to improve that. An application that doesn't tick all of the boxes does increase the chances of failing at the first hurdle. And I've already mentioned that a surprising number do. So in terms of our initial quality assurance process, during this past year, about 1 in 4 applications, 25%, have not made it through that initial screening process. For some of those applications, 30 or 40%, something of that order, we don't see them again. So presumably that's because they've formed a view that they can't get benefits sufficient to make it a viable proposition. We have increased the effort we put into that initial screening, and the idea there is to try and help you improve the quality of the applications so that when we receive them, they get through the system much faster. What that has resulted in is a substantial increase in the rejection rates during the first 4 months of this year. So during those months, the rejection rates varied by month between 25% and 44%. So in 1 month, there were almost half of those applications which didn't meet the benchmark. I'm really pleased to say that over more recent months, those numbers have fallen dramatically. So I think that does suggest that working together, we can and are seeing an improvement in the quality of the applications we're receiving. As a way of helping provide a sense for how long assessments might take, because it's very difficult for us to give you a definite time, we do publish information on the average length of time that applications have been with us. Now, traditionally, we've tended to focus on our measure, which is how long has the application been actively processed or worked on within the office. But this does exclude the amount of time that applications spend back with the applicant and or with ministers for those that have where they are required as the final decision makers. So this graph, which is being updated monthly now on the website, gives you an idea of the breakdown of the time frames. Now, one of the noticeable things when you look at that chart is the relative amount of time that an application is spent where we are actively working on it, as opposed to the amount of time that an application is spent sitting back with the applicant. And if you look at category 2, you'll see that On average, last year they took about 148 days to complete, so that's 28 weeks. Of that, 71 working days, so about half they were with the applicant. Now, we are hoping to reduce both the time it's spent with us, the 56-day target, by at least 20%. And we also want to work with you to try and reduce the 71 days. We had a conversation this morning in Christchurch where it became apparent to me that the way in which we ask our questions can influence this. So some applicants prefer the questions to be drip-fed so they can start work on them immediately. Others prefer them to come in all at once. That might be having an impact on the amount of time it rests with you. So the more we can understand what you need and how we can help reduce the time it's with you, the faster those applications will get through the process. Alongside the information, which is backward-looking, about how long applications have taken to get through the process, we're also publishing information on the number of applications we have to hand. And as you'll see in the chart behind me, we've been making progress, really good progress actually, since about September, October of last year, with the applications on hand dropping down, reaching a trough in about April. We've had a significant increase, in particular in the last month. We're now up to about 86 or something like that, 88. There may be a number of reasons for that. One might be a way of trying to avoid avoiding the increase in fees. Certainly in Wellington and Christchurch, the feedback I got from some of the participants was that that was definitely a driver. It could be a reflection of the fact that our rejection rates have been higher. Some of those applications have now been resolved and they're back with us, or it could be an increase in economic activity. But either way, if you're looking at those charts and you're trying to judge what's likely to happen over the next few months, it's a pretty safe bet that application is going to take longer for us to process applications over the next few months as we get our heads around the increased number. I want to quickly run through a couple of other ideas or tips for improving the likelihood of a positive result, including all the information about ownership structures, how the company is controlled, beneficial ownership information, and shareholding documentation is really essential. We spend a lot of our time trying to unpick sometimes what can be quite complex ownership structures, and it's a core part of our role is to confirm what that ownership structure is. So there does need to be clarity over who the decision makers are and who have responsibility for day-to-day decisions. It's critical too that background checks are thorough and that all issues surrounding the applicant's good character are fully explored. Again, it's often a cause of substantial delay. You'll all be mindful of publicity over recent weeks about the Colin Muir case. Just for the record, the information that was made public that was found on the internet about the owners was information that the office had. We had found that information on the internet just as others had found. And when you find information like that, inevitably it means we will need to engage in further conversation. So the idea of exposing as much information as possible, as early as possible, results in a faster process for the applicant. So the more of that you can do up front, the more you can clear all of that with your client very early, again, the faster the process. And please remember, we are always happy to have a conversation in the pre-application stage to help answer any questions. We had one this morning around, what does an offence mean? If you had a parking ticket, a speeding ticket, or you were locked up overnight for drunk and disorderly when you were 17, does that count? And we do have some guidance on our website, but if you have any of those questions, please talk to us. I do want to touch on a favourite of ours. I'm sure it's a favourite of yours, the counterfactual. The reality is that this is something that has been imposed on us by the courts. We don't have a choice about whether or not to apply the counterfactual. So given that, the question is, how can we make that again as less cost as possible, as fruitful as possible, given we have to do it?
Legislated away.
The Minister's already indicated that while at some point I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to review the legislation, we aren't in a position to review the legislation today. So hence my comment. Given the context we have, the question is what's the best we can do within that context. I'd like to emphasise that it is really important that the counterfactual that the application focuses on is the most likely counterfactual. Don't just rely on the counterfactual that will make the application look the best. And we do need to, you do need to provide information and evidence to support the fact that this is the most likely counterfactual. So we will be looking for that evidence, whether it's, has the investment been advertised, where was it advertised, how long was it advertised, were there any other potential buyers for that property. Something else I'd like to talk a little bit about is land investments, in terms of the benefits of those investments. Now, the with and without test, again, due to the court decision, does need to be applied to each of the relevant benefit factors. And so it is something we see quite frequently, that applications either don't cover it off or they don't cover it off sufficiently well. And again, that can be a cause for delay. And it's not enough to claim that an alternative New Zealand buyer would not do something. You have to be able to tell a story about why they wouldn't do it as opposed to why the overseas investor would. Bear in mind that it is the applicant's responsibility to create that story. It's not our responsibility to create the evidence to support that story. So the more you can provide us up front, the better off. At the same time, at the margin, there are some things that will that an overseas applicant can do that can help create a net benefit or improve the net benefit test, for which you do not need the counterfactual analysis. So, for example, increasing the extent to which New Zealanders might be involved in that investment. We're also expected, as part of the fee increase, to beef up our monitoring and enforcement. I mentioned that earlier. And the government's expectation is that applicants will meet ongoing conditions and that compliance isn't optional. I've mentioned the site visits. It's also reflected in the variation fee, where a decision's been taken that the fee for a simple time extension is the same as a fee for the more substantive variation. So in other words, once committed to, there is an expectation that those conditions will be met. All of this will be reinforced in a revised directive letter. The Minister of Finance is responsible for the Overseas Investment Act. We apply the Act at his request and subject to the direction letter from him. That's currently being revised to take into account these new priorities, the new focus, and to reflect some of the exemptions that I referred to earlier. Before we open the floor for a conversation, I just want to go back to something I said at the very beginning, which is I do see this, I believe that we actually have a similar objective here, which is about bringing good quality investment to New Zealand. I know that's not always how it's felt on your side, and I guess what you're hearing from us is we would like to change that. We are doing things practically to change that. We're also keen to hear what else we can do to change that. And some of that will be things that we can do. Some of that will be things that you might be able to do with a little bit of help from us. So that's really the purpose of what we'd like to hear this afternoon. And at this point, I'll hand over to Brian and happy to move into question time.